Hey there everybody, I'm Jack and this is Raw Tropical Living. Thanks for joining me today. Sorry I didn't get a video out to you yesterday. I was down in Pensacola. I had mentioned it before, hanging out with a couple of really good friends of mine from back home in Costa Rica and their 3 kids. Had a great time. The kids were great. I enjoy. There was a 2-year-old, 4-year-old, and a 6-year-old. So that was a lot of fun and it was really good getting to see them. So yeah, I just had a good 2 days, got out of town just overnight, but it was really good for me. But anyhow, today I want to talk about dealing with anxiety. And hey guys, I do videos every day, so if you haven't already subscribed, why don't you go down there and hit that subscribe button and come back and check out what else I got to say. Although it's not going to be anything earth-shattering, I'll give you that in advance. But yeah, I'm just real mellow right now. I just drove home. I just came in a little while ago. I'm about to go out to the store, get something, maybe get some lettuce or something for dinner. I don't know. But yeah, it was really good. But it was a really good thing seeing these people because as I was driving home, I was like, you know what? There's a new mentality. I got to get back home. You know, I'm here for my mom and whatever, and I'm happy to be here. And if circumstances were to somehow prevent me beyond my control from not getting back to the tropics, hopefully Costa Rica in the future, I'd be okay with that, but not if I didn't do everything I can do to get back there. So from now on, to get back home, it's by any means necessary. By any means necessary. I've got a mentality locked in. So anxiety. I've dealt with some anxiety over the last year, and I have my method. You know, I have certain ways that I deal with it and to keep it from getting any bigger. I like to cut something off, or at least not suppress it, but deal with it, you know, when it comes up and not let it just kind of keep growing. And let me make a disclaimer. We live in a world now. That's the only thing about 2019, and we can share with a lot of people. We have to make a disclaimer for everything, because if we use the word wrong, we're going to hurt this person. If we use the word wrong, we're going to hurt this person. I never intend to hurt somebody, but I hate to have to tiptoe around language and speech so much. So anxiety, let me just make it very clear here what I'm talking about with anxiety. I know people deal with actual, you know, I think there's, in my mind anyway, there's 2 types of anxiety. There's just the normal anxiety that people deal with, which can be still quite challenging, but then there's something else, where people have attacks. I'm not talking about that serious form of it, and I'm no health professional, mental health professional or whatever, so I don't know exactly. All I'm saying is if it's something like that, like if it's clinical anxiety, yes, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about the everyday garden anxiety. But for me, anxiety, I've told you many times on here, and I think some people say, yeah, whatever. I don't allow stress. Stress kills. I used to have a lot of stress in my life. I used to have a lot of, not necessarily self-caused stress, but things that really weren't that big that I would just let them get blown out of proportion. And that eats away with you. Stress is a killer. Stress is worse than alcohol, cigarettes, drugs, a lot of things. Stress kills people every day. So anxiety is about the most I deal with it. When I, have anxiety, I try to deal with it immediately. Sometimes it's just random stray stuff but I still have to kind of catch my mind. Like I'll wake up sometime in the middle of the night and have a little bit of anxiety, about just certain things. What about the future? I screwed off a large portion of my life. I'm 55 years old. I was drunk for 30 years, but I was probably irresponsible for 48 years. So I've made a lot of poor decisions in my life when it comes to my future. So, and also the situation I find myself in now, I sometimes, things start piling up and the brain starts running. It starts running on its own, and I can feel it a little bit, and I'll feel it in the middle of the night. Now, what I'm getting at here is what most people like to do when they're dealing with anxiety and or stress is they do the opposite of what they should do. I hope if you're watching me, you're not drinking, you're not drugging, you're not smoking a cigarette, but some people do that. I did that to deal with stress. Anytime you had a tough day, I'm smoking a cigarette because I'm stressed. I can't get into the physical, what exactly the cigarette does in your body, but the cigarette, all that's going to do is exacerbate that stress. It doesn't make it any better. It kind of gets you more wound up. The booze, when you use booze to get rid of stress, you're going to have that stress. The booze don't take stress away. Booze just gets rid of that stress for a little while. Next day, you're going to have that stress. And a lot of people do it for anxiety. They use a lot of the same things for when they have anxiety. Now, I think it's just so important when you're anxious. You can even extrapolate past there to when you have stress. That's the time you need to be as clean and healthy as possible. That's the time you need to be crystal clear and focused. And that's why there's a lot of different changes that happened in my life in the last 7 years, but I think the two things more than anything that help me deal with my anxiety on a day-to-day basis, and it's a real thing, it's an exercise I can grasp at any time, is number one, just staying on a clean way of eating, diet, and number two is my mindfulness meditation practice. Within the breath, I know I talk about that a lot, and I'm going to talk about it even more. The blog, I'm getting the blog redone, and I'm going to start sharing a lot about my mindfulness practice over there, but I use everyday mindfulness. I'm not that guy that's going to sit here like, a John Kabat-Zinn or Thich Nhat Hanh and get all super deep on it. I want to share everyday mindfulness and how you can use everyday mindfulness to solve little practical issues in your life. And that's just what I do. As soon as that anxiety starts coming in, I just go to the breath. Everything in life is about the breath. Because when we're focused on the breath, all focusing on the breath it's not some hocus pocus or woo-woo type stuff or any mystical. Focusing on the breath is because when we focus on the breath, we're single pointed. That's all we're focusing on if we get locked in. And you may not do it, you may only do it for one breath. And I think sometimes when people are dealing with anxiety, just one good in and out can be all it takes to where you just kind of, in other words, like if you're dealing with anxiety, if you're worried about something in the future, think about what anxiety, stress usually is. It's the worry about something in the future. It's the worry about something that hasn't happened yet. In other words, you've gone out of the now. When we bring ourselves, conversely, people can have stress and anxiety by going back into the past, but it's usually about worrying about the future. So when we can just take hold of that breath, when we can stop for a second, okay, I'm feeling anxious. Anxiety's welling up in me. Maybe it's even starting to get strong and you're like starting to get a little panicky. You just stop. And you take that deep breath and all you realize is I'm breathing in, I'm breathing out. And if you do it real nice and slow, and if you're really mindful about it, that's kind of an oxymoron, isn't it? But if you're really engaged, even if it's just one, that can be such a safety valve. Like, the pot's about to boil over on the stove, you take that breath, that lets the pressure off. So now you can do it. Now, if you want to keep on, I would recommend if you're stressed, if you're anxious, whatever, don't just do one breath, but stay with that and just stay with that. Stay in the now, because in the now, nothing's wrong unless there is something wrong. I mean, if you've got something happening to you right in this minute, but in general, if we're in the now, we're okay. If we're in the now, we can figure things out. And if we're not anxious, if we're not stressed, and we have a clear mind and we're staying in the now, the chances are much better that we are going to come up with something to solve the potential problems that we're anxious about or worried about in the first place. So it's an active process. I think sometimes people think that there's no control, or like if they deal with anxiety or if they deal with stress, that's just something that happens. They don't realize, and maybe you have to do a little practice. Maybe you have to take that leap of faith and jump a little bit and say, okay, screw it. They keep talking about this mindfulness. What have I got to lose? I've even seen people share mindfulness and not use the word mindfulness for people that don't like, labels or whatever. Because to be quite honest with you, this whole mindfulness, I was just in a health food store earlier today, and everything, there's Mindfulness magazine, there's Time does an issue on mindfulness. Mindfulness is trending right now, and I know certain people's brains, because my brain can be like that with certain things. If it becomes a thing, if it's trendy, a lot of people are doing it, you tend to be repelled from it. But it's just basic, it's ancient wisdom. It's been around forever. But if we can just stay in the moment if we can, come back to that moment, we can take control back. That's all anxiety. That's all anxiety is. It's kind of a loss of. To me, it's like a feeling like you've lost control. That breath is control. You're able. That is something that as long as you're physically healthy and you don't have any breathing issues or something, I can't. That would be an exception. That in breath and that out breath, that is totally in your control. You have that tool. It's your fingertips anytime you want to use it. You don't have to and if you just want a few tips on it, on little ways to to use it yourself, go online. You could watch an hour. You could play on YouTube for an hour and watch some, and you could figure out a way to use this to really make a practical difference in your life. I mean, listen, I say it over and over, and I want to make sure it's not just the food. Last 7 years have been the best 7 years of my life, and it's because a lot of these practices. I think the food, cutting booze, gave me the capacity, gave me kind of a little bit more clarity to come to these things. But I've used mindfulness before. The thing is, it's almost like you had something neat in your pocket and you didn't know what you had. I used it at times before. I used that 20 years ago when I was having a bad shift at the bar I was working at, and I'd go in the walk-in cooler and I was just about ready to stab somebody with the oyster knife. And I'd go in that cooler. And I didn't have that much time. It was a busy bar, so I'd go in that cooler. I'd take a few breaths, be aware of the in-breath, be aware of the out-breath. I'd go back out to the bar, and I was okay. I might have to go in again on that shift, and a lot of times it was stuff that was partially caused by me as well. I mean, people were giving me there were people that were doing things that gave me a hard day, but I was usually hungover, in some bad state of mind. So anyhow, it's something you can use. And like I say, this is just bumbling, rambling a little bit today, just a little bit of something I wanted to share because I know so many people are anxious all the time. I can tell by things they write to me. I can tell by comments. I can tell by things I see on social media that I'm not even a part of the conversation. But there's always something you can use to alleviate that. You just got to do it. Anyhow, hope you guys enjoyed this one today. If you like it, please give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace.